Hi, I'm Paul speaking for Free Range with Gail of Gaia. On today's program, Gail welcomes Dave the Mystic to the show. You've probably heard him on Blog Talk Radio. You've probably seen his website. You may have heard of him. You may not have. But after this show, you are going to be going straight to Dave for all of your fun and interesting questions. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. This is Gail of Gaia, and this is Free Range, where we graze on wild ideas and welcome wonderful guests. And I have a great one for you today. And just before I start, though, I'd like to mention that this is a listener-supported program, and we need help in that regard. So please do bear that in mind. If you're able to contribute, I would appreciate it immensely. Now, that being said, Dave the Mystic has quite a fascinating background. He's an energy medicine practitioner, a healer, and an intuitive with over 35 years of experience in the state of Colorado. He has multiple technical degrees and is technically known as a rocket scientist. And in the early 80s, Dave had some turning points in his life that led to a passion in discovering and developing his gifts in multiple forms of energy healing. He embarked on a path of training in many modalities and developed an understanding of how the different systems work. They complement each other and how to support spirituality. Dave has gifts in healing. He's able to read the Akashic records. He does energy and entity clearing. He has an ability to changing core beliefs, karmic burning, and discerning spiritual gifts for others. Dave continually seeks out new modalities, learns experiences, and shares with other practitioners. And he has a weekly Blog Talk Radio show. Okay, he's a strong believer in health issues and has many potential causes in different energy planes, which you will explain to us today, I hope. And you work with many spiritual guides and you communicate with them frequently. Could you tell us more about that? Welcome, Dave. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this. It should be fun. So
yes. Well, tell us where, go ahead and tell, even though I read your background, why don't you go ahead and explain it even on a more personal level?
Sure. If we go in the Wayback Machine to when I was a child in fifth grade, I discovered electricity and electronics and knew that I had to find out how it worked. And I marched through a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in electrical engineering with an emphasis on bioelectrical sciences. And I worked at General Motors for a couple of years, got tired of General Motors, went back to Wichita where I grew up and worked for Boeing for a couple of years and decided I need to get out of Wichita and ended up joining Martin Marietta in Denver and came out in 1981. And I've been in Denver ever since. But along the way, when I was about 11, my parents divorced. My dad was both an Episcopal priest and a management consultant. He had an engineering degree. And my parents divorced. And my mom got interested in astrology about that time. And I ended up being her test subject for trying different things psychic. My older brothers all joked about her and called her Madam Zelda and wouldn't have anything to do with it. But I was the guinea pig. And so I was open to it. I didn't pursue it in college. But in 1983, I went back to Wichita for my 10th high school reunion, ran into an old friend, and he started asking me questions like, well, did you become an electrical engineer like you expected? And I said, yeah. And he said, do you think it's possible to change things at a distance? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he kept beating around the bush. And he finally said, why don't you come over to my house after the picnic? I want to show you some things. And we went to his house. And when we got out of the car, he walked me over to the electric meter on his house. And he pointed to the wheel that was spinning. And he said, do you have a feeling for the pace of the wheel? And I said, sure. And for those of you who aren't familiar with these, the rate of the wheel spinning is how much power you're using at that moment in time. If you turned on your stove, it would suddenly start spinning faster. If you turn off all your lights, it would spin slower. And so he said, do you have an idea of how fast it's spinning? And I said, sure. And he points at the electric meter and says, now, and is slowed by a third. And he said, I did this to my mother's house several months ago, and her bills are still lower. Well, wow, this is impressive.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so we went inside, and he had a little black and white TV on rabbit ears. And Wichita only had 4 transmitted channels, and he put it on a channel that was just snow. And he points at the TV and says, now, and he tunes in a station, um, which was quite remarkable. Um,
I'd say he sounds magical.
yeah, we went over to a stereo. He was a disc jockey at the time at an FM station, and he had a very nice stereo, and it had the VU meters on meter needles on it. And when the music on the right channel goes higher or louder, then the needle goes up, and when it gets softer, it goes down. So you can see the relative volume between the balance for the two sides. And he said, do you see how the needles are moving? I said, sure. And he points at it and goes, now, the needles went out of phase with the loudness of the music. So when it got louder, the needles went down instead of up. Well, okay, that's pretty curious. So he said, let's go out and sit in the car. I want to show you something. So we sat in his car, and he started it and had it idling. His feet and hands were off the controls. This was a conventional ignition car. And he kind of points at the engine and says, now, and the idle slowed down to the point where it was stalling. And he said, I can stall other cars in traffic. It's like, wow, this is really impressive. And then the final thing he showed me that day was we went down to his radio station as a 50,000 watt FM station. We went into the room where they have all the meters that give the health of the transmitter. And there was one that was a digital panel meter, and it was reading 99.6, which meant that 99.6% of the 50,000 watts was going out the antenna. And he said, I can lower it. He said, if I lower it too much, I'll trip them off the air because they think there's a fault. And he said, I've done that. But he said, I'm going to lower it just a little bit for you. And he said, you see how it's stable? And I said, yeah, it is rock solid at 99.6. And he kind of points and he goes, now, and it dropped to 99.2. Well, 0.4% of 50,000 watts is a whole lot of power to instantaneously control, do it on command, and to have that effect show up. So we said our goodbyes, and I came back to Denver, and I've stayed in touch with him over the years. He still has the gift. But I came back to Denver and said, I have to find out what's going on. I felt like the 2 big hands of the creator had come down and said, I'm going to give you a demonstration that you can't ignore, because it was right in my area, is electrical engineering. I knew he couldn't fake this stuff. So I really started jumping into all this. And I got involved with taking psychic development classes. I got involved with a group that was channeling Tibetan ascended masters. Got in a group that was teaching therapeutic touch, one of the energy healing modalities, and I took all their classes. And all these, the thing that was really nice is I kept getting demonstrations for Dave the engineer to see validations on this. For example, in the energy healing class, the instructor, she brought in some people test cases for us to energetically diagnose and then treat. And she brought in a woman, and she was in her 50s, a little bit heavy set, and she said she has a diagnosed condition. What do you think? And as soon as she walked in the door, I knew it was abdominal. And then when it was my turn to scan her with my hands, I not only got the colon, I got the transverse colon. And it turns out she absolutely had a diagnosed condition there. And it was probably what we call Crohn's now, but they didn't have Crohn's as a definition back then. So I really felt like that validated a lot of the work I was doing. And I had other experiences in this energy healing system too. And then other things happened with the psychic development classes. One of the fun ones was they had us put our hands together with just a partner for a little experiment. And we were supposed to either send mentally the color red or send blue. And I thought, well, I'm going to play with them. And I sent purple, and my partner picked up purple. And, things like that really came out good. And I experienced in this healing class, my partner, I went to one of the classes, is about 30 miles away where I had to go. And I was driving home, and I'd been feeling bad in the class, like I was coming down with something. And my partner had seen it. And I'm driving home, and all of a sudden I felt this big warm wave just engulf me and overcome me. And I thought, I wonder what's going on. And so when I went to the class the following week, I said, "Did you send me remote healing when I was driving home?" She goes, "Yeah." And it's like, great, because once again, I wasn't expecting it, and it just happened, and then I made the connection. And so I've had many, many experiences like that through my life on using all of these gifts. And I ended up in a time period where my career took some changes and turns, and um, I had some Air Force R&D contracts from 2003 to 2007. And when I won those, I was able to quit the job I was working at. The big hands came down and again said, "You have all the time you need, all the money you need. Go learn everything you can about healing." And so I did 4 years of intensive work on developing psychic gifts, taking different healing modalities. I even went to acupuncture school for a couple terms and then decided that wasn't for me. But it gave me a good background in Chinese medicine. So
Yes,
all these
definitely.
things just keep flowing, working with reading past lives, working with energy and entity clearing. That started in 2008. A gift several years ago was karma burning, uh, where I can walk people through a guided meditation where they burn all karma, all karmic connections with other people from other lifetimes for all their past lives, and they just get rid of it. Uh, it appears that the universe is getting ready to drop karma. We don't have the time in
That's
front of us to keep having future lives where we try things over and over again.
That's fascinating. That's what I've heard too, is that karma is going away,
Yeah.
on a long-term basis, and because we're ascending, the planet is
Hmm.
ascending, people are ascending, and they're having symptoms as a result of that. Do you have any information on that, or what are you getting from your guides? I understand you have guides and
Yeah. The
spiritual connections and so on.
Sure,
And
sure. You know, I will always allow other people to have different impressions, different downloads, things like that. Anything. I don't believe in dogma, and so
you're
this is
open-minded.
this is Dave's
Yeah.
view of the world,
Mhm.
and this is what I've gotten. Other people may have gotten different impressions. They may have journeyed to different places, have different ideas. But uh, what I've received is that we're on Earth number three out of a string of seven. And so we have two that are lower vibration than ours and four that are higher vibration. And we're approaching a time when a whole lot of people are going to migrate off of this particular Earth and go to the higher Earths. There are also some
Yes.
people who are going to go to lower vibration Earths. They aren't
Mm.
ready to go up. Um, there are some religious groups on the planet who want to have a very restrictive life. They don't want to take advantage of creativity, of having balance between the sexes, things like that. And so they may go to a rather boring and humdrum life on a lower vibration planet. Maybe it has more challenges, but that seems to be what they think is ideal. And they try to force it on other people, and other people don't want it. So they may go there. I also feel, though, that maybe 1 billion people have already left our Earth and gone to these higher Earths. Um, how could they do that without us noticing? Two ways. One is take advantage of natural disasters like the big tsunami several years ago. Uh, the body count, which is kind of gross, but the body count on the beaches and then the debris just didn't come anywhere near close to how many people disappeared. The other thing that the spiritual plane can do, I believe, is they can alter your background and essentially change your background. So if a family had four sons and then they woke up one morning, all the pictures showed three sons, they had three sons sleeping in the house, and they never remembered having a fourth son. that would be another way for people to move. I think one of these days, some of the people who do demographics on food use, fuel use, water usage, all those types of things, they're going to come across a startling revelation that we're not using as much stuff as we should be for 7.5 billion people, and maybe we have significantly less than 7.5 billion at this time. Uh, so, and I think this ties into the idea that karma is going away because I see major migrations in a, who knows, it could be 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 years, 20 years, 200 years. I don't know. But in the big picture of things, it's coming soon. And we just don't have time for these karmic experiences where, okay, I was the bad guy and I shot Bill. Well, I'm going to come back in the next lifetime. I'm going to be the victim. I'm going to come back in another lifetime. After that, I'm going to be the mother of the victim to try all these different viewpoints. I just don't see that we have the time in our clock time future to experience this. So I think things are shifting very rapidly, and some people choose to call it moving to the 5D. There's a lot of books on that, a lot of experiential things there. But clearly, I think we're moving. And in terms of my energy and entity clearing business, I think this type of energy stirring up is also affecting the dark entities. And my clearing business has gone up exponentially since 2012. And so
I
I think
bet.
that's really got things churning also.
Well, I have information from various people that many of the dark entities, if not all of them, but a vast majority of them, have been removed from the planet. Do you? Um,
Well, I'd like to think that, but I sure run
I
into a
know,
lot
so
of
would
them
I.
now.
So there's
So
still some that are hanging around, or people
there's
still.
still a lot hanging around. And,
Mhm.
uh, when I look at the big scheme of things and talking to the creator energy about why we have evil on the planet, I think it goes way, way back. And I think the idea was how can we challenge people so that they'll spiritually grow? And to do that, you need to have some level of evil. I think it went overboard. I think we ended up with too
It kind of
much,
went out of balance.
went out of balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that was the original plan, rather than just putting people here and saying, "Okay, enjoy a vacation in Tahiti and do it for 60 or 70 years and then come home." I don't think it was ever intended for that. I get the feeling from my journeys that we're on one of the roughest, toughest planets in the universe, and it's a boot camp, and we deliberately choose to come here to grow. We don't come here to coast.
That's definitely true, and I think that for people to know that, and you had to be a warrior spirit in order to come here. I don't think just, I mean, out of all the
Yeah.
different beings that are here, I think there's a rather select group, and some of us unfortunately haven't been able to necessarily wake up from some of the mind control and then the indoctrination or whatever, and others have.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, would you agree with that? Or
Oh yeah, yeah, I think so. And I think the other thing we also have here are a fair number of what we call backdrop people, and that's a term that was brought out by Dolores Cannon in one of her books, and I've found out some other people use it. But a fair number of people who are souls here that traditionally haven't been on a evolutionary path. They're kind of like the extras on stage to fill out the whole scene. And I started working with some spiritual beings a couple of years ago, saying I think we're at a point now where morally we need to move the backdrop people to a spiritually evolving soul status, and so that's happening now too. So they aren't left behind.
wow, that's fascinating. And there's a lot of talk about people having soul fragments or that due to different
Hmm.
traumas that have happened and so on. Are do you are you being guided to find out, is that coming together, coming back to people? Are their soul fragments coming back, or
Well,
do they have
yeah.
to do something? How does that work?
Well, a lot of clients show up, and if they're interested in it, we look at doing a soul splinter retrieval. And The idea for listeners is that you may go through a trauma as a child or a young adult, or even later in some cases, where you go through something very harsh, or it may just be your perspective is very harsh. You're 3 years old and you ride your tricycle down the steps and you get banged up and you're very scared. Um, and the soul may say, "This isn't what I bargained for. This isn't what I agreed to." And a piece of it splits off and goes into the astral plane and kind of sets up a nice little green place with a playhouse by a creek with some toys. And it just hangs out there. And the passage of time really isn't noted. And so if I muscle test for people and find out that they have some of these, then I go out and I find the youngest one first and talk to it and convince it that the person is now an adult and can safely take that energy back in and protect it. And if there's more soul splinters at older ages, we go find those and retrieve those and integrate those back into the person. It's been fascinating. Again, I like the evidential part of this. The stories that I get from these soul splinters, probably at least 80% of them have either been verified by the client or the client has checked with family members and gotten back to me later and verified the story. And, this could be some type of abuse. It could be an accident. It could be a car wreck. Who knows? But the other fascinating thing with soul splinters is I have a couple friends who go to uh, gathering places for veterans, and they put up a sign that says,
Yeah.
"Maybe I can help you with your PTSD." And the viewpoint is that um, so say you have a battle zone and you have bullets flying and you have soldiers dying. Well, no soldier goes into a battle zone saying, "This will be my day to die." They all go in saying, "I'm going to be protected and I'm going to survive and I'm going to walk away from this." Well, some of them obviously don't. And um, one of the theories with these people who do this work with PTSD is that when a soldier gets shot and killed, they may throw off soul splinters out of the psychological shock.
Ooh,
And these
wow.
soul splinters are like porcupine quills, and they stick in other soldiers. And those other soldiers go home and they have this psychological shock concept stuck in their field, and it's not theirs, but they can't tell the difference. And so these friends of mine at these veterans gatherings, they work on removing these soul splinters from the energy field of these soldiers and repatriating them in the spiritual plane with the original person that they came from to get them out of this poor soldier's field where they're picking up that psychological trauma from it. So I find that theory very
Wow.
fascinating, and it seems to
That is.
work for these people who do this. Uh,
Etheric shrapnel.
Etheric shrapnel,
Yeah, that's a
absolutely.
good way of putting it, Paul. Etheric shrapnel.
I've
What
I've
about
got a
past
couple of
life?
points. I've got a couple of
Okay.
just before we go to past lives, I got a couple of points that I want to throw in here. I think the backdrop people point that you made was really really interesting,
Yes.
and the reason for that
Yes.
is because uh, there is disclosure in it's a very soft, subtle disclosure, but it's definitely disclosure. There have been reports that video games, like online interactive video games, when you're getting on a game, that a number of the people that you're playing against you think are real people are actually bots that are built into the game.
Hmm.
But if they did not have those bots, the game wouldn't be fun enough because nobody wants to play a game when there's only three other guys in this entire city, you know. So they
Yeah.
have a bunch of these other players in there.
Hmm.
Now, the movie Free Guy, have you seen the movie Free
Yes.
Guy?
I was
Okay.
going to bring that up. That's fascinating. Yeah.
There you go. There's the backdrop people. They're called non player characters.
Right.
And they have all these people, and their only job is to live in this synthetic matrix and get shot and beaten up every day of their life. And
Yes.
to continually do the same thing over and over again. Like Gail says, the hamster wheel of life. You get up in the morning, you wake up at exactly the same time, you get exactly the same kind of coffee everybody else gets. You go to work, the same events that happen during the day while you're at work, they happen every single day. It's kind of like a Groundhog Day thing.
Groundhog
Yes.
Day. I was
And
wondering if you were going to
it,
go.
it
That's
is just, it's crazy that there is all of this disclosure out there and people just aren't seeing it.
Yes. Yes.
Are they in a
Absolutely.
hypnotic state? I have to wonder about that from the programming, from TV and indoctrination in the subconscious when they were very small, that kind of thing. I have to wonder if that comes into play. But based on what Paul was talking about, it reminded me, because I haven't seen the show that you're talking about, Freeman, but The Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Really remember the part where the blonde woman goes walking by, he turns his head and looks, and then he explains to him basically that she's one of those filler people, kind of thing. And so that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Well, this also ties into another thing. There's a term called morphic fields. It's short for morphological fields. It was started by a guy named Rupert Sheldrake, a very well-respected researcher in England, and he came up with it because he just kind of reached a conclusion that there wasn't enough information in DNA to define the overall shape of an organism. It could specify changes in cells and specialization, but in terms of a head up here, two arms, two legs, and a trunk, he didn't see it as having enough information. And one of the things that he used to support that, and he feels is just something you just can't dispute, is Kirlian photography. In Kirlian photography, it's electrical discharge. You're connected to a high voltage pulsating source. You put your hand on a piece of film, and you get these corona discharge patterns around your fingertips. Very, very fascinating. And when you do it in color, it looks great. You can put a leaf on there, and they call it the cut leaf phenomena, because now it doesn't happen every time, but it happens enough times and you can't explain it, where you take a fresh leaf in spring off of a tree, you tear off a piece of it, you put the leaf on the film, and when you do the outline or do the electrical discharge, instead of the outline where the cut is, you see the outline of the original leaf. And there's just no way to credibly explain how you get that outline of the original leaf on there. I mean, there's no contamination effects on the film, nothing weird about the electrical field, nothing. And so he uses that as one of his strongest indicators that we do have an energy field around us that defines our shape, defines how we develop and grow. But these morphic fields sort of have gotten into the idea of what are memes. But we run into the thing, and where you just follow me down the rabbit hole as I talk about this.
It's fascinating. Keep going.
Morphic fields can be a field of consciousness that can be created by a group of people who all share commonly held beliefs. And where this is a problem is, a number of years ago, I started running into people who were doing trance channeling, and the person that they were bringing through, the entity, did not sound authentic to me. And when I energetically checked, it wasn't authentic. And what I came to understand is that, if enough people have an idea of what, I'll just throw out Lord Maitreya looks like as a consciousness, as an energy, and you can look this up online to see what the beliefs are. If enough people have common beliefs, they can form a morphic field that will start taking on a consciousness. And if a trance channel does not apply discernment, when they go to channel this Lord Maitreya, they may get the morphic field instead of getting the authentic real deal in the spiritual plane. And so what comes through is trite information, trivial information, commonly held information, but not the authentic information. And so these morphic fields can do these things. Now, if you think about it, the characters like in Mario Brothers. We have the gorilla at the top, and the gorilla shows up every time you play the game, and he stomps his feet, and barrels and logs and things come down that you have to dodge.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough people who probably think about what that gorilla represents that they've created inadvertently a morphic field for the consciousness of that gorilla. So, is there a conscious field that is starting to think independently, sort of like Guy in the movie Free Guy, where he gets a dose of artificial intelligence and he starts thinking independently outside of the game of just being the a non-player character. And I think, yeah, I think a lot of things in our reality may start taking on consciousness out of these morphic fields. And it's not always for the best purposes either. There may be morphic fields that define dark entities, dark things, dark conscious, uh, and especially people who are playing with magic or dark stuff. They may be subject to some of these things starting to emerge as personalities in what they're dabbling in. So, just some things to think about here.
Wow, that's fascinating. But the thing that came to mind when you were saying that, when groups of like-minded people get together,
Mm-hmm.
one of the groups that came to mind were the Tibetan monks,
Mm-hmm.
and the ability that they seem to have developed, even as a collective, to be able to do things that are quite amazing.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
another one. Another one with this is getting into people with severe illnesses. You know, I always tell my regular clients, if you start to feel bad and it's not a crisis that you have to go to the urgent care, please call me first so I can work on it before you have a label on what is going on.
yeah,
Because
those
once you
labels are
get a
bad.
label, then you're connecting to these morphic fields. It's just like Wikipedia or the medical side of Wikipedia. You're going to start downloading information inadvertently to your subconscious. You know, if you showed up to me and you said, Dave, I just went to the doc, I found a lump, and he believes it's cancer in my left breast. Um, Trust me, you're going to be subconsciously downloading information on what's the treatment, what's the outcome, what are the side effects, what's the prognosis, am I going to survive, am I going to have a mastectomy, a surgery, whatever. You're going to be downloading all that. And when I go into work with you energetically on your healing, I have to get all that garbage out of you to get it out of the way because that's putting preconceptions in your subconscious about what the outcomes are.
Oh, that's fascinating. That is so true. I used to work in hospitals, and I even worked in Colorado for a while at the Denver VA. But one of the things that I saw that was very disturbing to me is once people got the diagnosis of cancer, um, or once the doctor would tell them, "Well, you have 6 months to live," things of that nature create. You just see people start to go downhill as a result of it.
Yeah.
And I, because it's just like you said, it goes into their subconscious, and it's like, if I have a diagnosis of anything, I don't even want to know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, Unless it's so obvious that I need to, have something done immediately or something like that. But because I'll tell you something that has bothered me, that somebody told me. They said something, and this wasn't all that long ago, and I don't agree with it, but it still went into my subconscious because every once in a while it comes up, and they said, "Well, your pineal gland is 88% calcified," and I'm like, "What?" And I don't believe that's true. But every once in a while, I think about it and I go, could that be true? So and then I said, and I don't want to form that field, but um, I've done a lot of detox in my life, and I keep telling myself that and that kind of thing. But that's I can see exactly what you're saying because I've seen it in others, and I've even seen it in myself. It's so
Mhm.
important, what you let into your I guess you would call it a morphic field, or your auric field, or um,
Yeah. Well, if you think about like neurofibromyalgia, um, there's a lady who used to lecture on teaching matrix energetics, and she used to be a drug rep for one of the pharmacy companies. And
mhm.
she said, "Did you know that neurofibromyalgia was not a name or a diagnosis until there's a drug available to treat it?"
Boy, why that doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Okay. And if you really look into it, neurofibromyalgia is not really a diagnosis, it's a description of symptoms. But people, they believe out of the medical establishment that, oh, well, they know what's going on then. No, they don't know what's going on. It's a description of a cluster of symptoms, and here's a drug that helps some people, and basically we're going to put you on some type of drug to just handle the symptoms for the rest of your life, and go away and don't bother me for 6 months. And
Oh,
but I know people who've gotten energy medicine and other self treatments, and they've overcome neurofibromyalgia. They've become pain free, even though the medical establishment says this is chronic. You're going to have it forever and ever, and the best we can do is treat the
or
symptoms.
they tell people you'll never walk again, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
some people are able to just overcome that. But no, speaking of what you're talking about, the psychiatric field is full of that.
yeah, yeah.
They don't have any diagnostic tests. It's all these so-called disorders or whatever are based on symptom, a category of symptoms.
Yeah,
And then all of a
yeah.
sudden a person is told they have this disorder or this problem or whatever it happens to be. And I mean, we could just make them up. I mean, I could say we have a nature deficit disorder because
Yeah,
I don't get
yeah.
out in nature enough or something like that. So that's a
hmm
real serious issue.
Well, if you go far enough back, being homosexual was defined as a disorder, and then they had to clean up their act and change their viewpoint, with society, and suddenly, being homosexual was not a disorder, you know. So they've stepped in it before with these diagnoses.
hmm Well, that's the whole problem with the Western medical society. It's diagnose and prescribe, diagnose and prescribe,
Yeah.
diagnose and prescribe, and very little is done about the background, the history,
Mhm.
and then there's a tendency to blame everything on genetics when, in fact, it's largely terrain related. And we are exposed to so many things, and I'm sure you're very
There's
aware
so
of
many
that.
chemicals in our environment now, and you really have to wonder why do we have so much more cancer than they had in the 1800s? You know,
Yeah, small
uh,
wonder, right?
yeah. Well,
I think
you look at all these organics that we have, and pesticides and herbicides, and things in plastics. We're ingesting this stuff all the time, and our wonderful bodies actually do a pretty darn good job of
They do.
keeping
They're
us
pretty
from
impressive.
being knocked out by these toxins, but they don't do it all.
Yeah, we have pretty
I,
radical
th-
resistance. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
yeah. I think it's interesting to note that a lot of these drugs that they're coming out for these weird diseases and all that, a lot of them are psychoactive because part of the disclosed side effects are always, you can take this drug to help you with weight loss, but uh, some users do experience suicidal tendencies as a result. So that means
Oh
it's a
yeah, yeah.
psychoactive drug. They're playing with your brain. And it's ridiculous. One other thing that I wanted to say before I completely brain farted it. If you're wondering where all of these negative entities that you're coming up with that you have to release from people, I believe that CERN opened a portal, a literal portal to hell, and let them into the world, and that's why the numbers of dark attachments are increasing.
Yes. hmm
It's kind of like the movie Ghostbusters. What did they do? It was Zool, the keymaster, and the gatekeeper, and they
Yes.
opened a freaking literal portal to hell on the top of the New York hotel. Okay, the walls in
Oh
the
my goodness.
fifth precinct were bleeding.
Well, you get another dose in the latest movie, but I don't want to spoil anything.
What latest movie?
The
What's
latest
what title?
Ghostbusters movie.
Oh, there's a
Oh,
new
the latest.
Ghostbusters? I didn't know there was
Yes.
one out. I d-
Yes,
oh, wow.
and
Okay.
it's got the grandchildren of Egon, or
Oh,
granddaughter of Egon.
Oh,
wow! I
lovely.
gotta see that. I gotta see that.
Yeah, it's a very nice continuation of the story. So yeah,
Wow.
go see it.
Awesome. I'm going to see it now. But anyway, I have a question too related to consciousness. And if your consciousness can be elevated just by being around other people who have a higher consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Why are ETs or other beings so reluctant to show themselves or to be present?
I think they are
Okay.
showing themselves massively
Okay.
at this point in
Okay.
time. If you look at the internet, there are pictures every day of spacecraft over airports or spacecraft around mountains. And it's become so commonplace that between that and movies that I think are inspired to help us be comfortable with the idea that ETs are coming, whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek or, any of those. Yeah, I
Predictive
think
programming, really, in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
I think they're conditioning us so that we'll get away from the knee jerk reaction of, oh my goodness, Ethel, grab the shotgun, here they come. You know, uh, we don't need that kind of behavior. I get when I muscle test about 340 different races of ETs that are hanging around Earth right now, and the vast majority are either friendly and helpful or just passive and watching. There are some bad actors in there, and sometimes their stuff gets corrected, and some of them are interacting with some bad actors of people on the planet. Um, it's maybe it's heresy for me to say it from coming from an aerospace background, but from what I believe I know and what I've heard, I think that the whole space program is a sham, and I think it's incredible that we still think we're advanced by using chemical rockets to get to space. Um, I believe that we have dark programs where we've reverse engineered ET spacecraft or even cooperated with them. And I think we have spacecraft that are routinely going all over the solar system at this point and in very, very short space flights to get from here to there. And so I think it's just for public consumption to have a rocket carry a satellite to space. I think to me it's kind of humorous or it's a joke now. And
I would agree
but
with you from
I
what
think
I've
the
read.
government's gone so far, though, in 60 or 70 years of hiding all this and hiding all the money that they've spent on it, that
Yeah.
I think they're afraid of what would the public reaction be if we found that we'd been conned and had our coffers tapped uh, with no vote on this and
They
no
used
knowledge.
it. They used it to fund black budget programs. I
Yeah,
Or
mean,
underground bases. Look at how the cities and everything that
yeah.
they built underground. I mean, my goodness, while they're giving us the illusion that they're doing space stuff, they're building these underground cities where they're going to go hide themselves um, when they do some other nefarious activities. At least
let,
that's what comes to my mind.
let me shatter an illusion right now. Okay, I'm going to shatter an illusion right now. If anybody
For
is
who?
doubting what Dave is saying about chemical rocketry being the dark ages, the patents for 3 patents have been released by the US Air Force. 3 patents. One for a room temperature semiconductor or superconductor. And that room temperature superconductor is used in a free energy device. And that free energy device powers an anti gravity aircraft called the TR-3B. Those patents have been released to the public, and they have had that tech for decades.
They've
Hmm.
had a lot of tech for decades that they haven't released to the people, that have been totally and completely suppressed, including healing technologies, which are supposed to be coming forward here soon. Now, speaking of spaceships, it's my understanding that there are ETs, extraterrestrials, or people that they actually create ships with their consciousness, or they're somehow connected
Hmm.
to the ship through consciousness. Are you familiar with that, Dave?
Yeah. I've gone and visited the Pleiadians, and I see a lot of distinction between the Pleiadians and the Syrians. The Pleiadians, they get into a ship that, from my experience, looks like a big egg, and has, just casual bench seats around the inside and no visible signs of controls. And through thought process, this thing brings them to the Earth in a few minutes from the Pleiades. Um, the Syrians, it looks more like the Star Trek approach, where you've got technology being used to get faster than speed of light transportation, and you have the warp drive, so to speak. So, excuse me, different point of view, but same outcomes where you can go zip zapping around the universe, around the solar system or the galaxy in just a blink of an eye. So, yeah, they're out there, and to have a spacecraft that has a conscious connection to the passengers, yeah, and that's very very logical for me. I mean, yeah, we have sort of like one of the
Can't steal somebody.
golden ring prizes right now for Amazon and some of these other companies, Microsoft, to come up with techniques where the computers can connect to your brain waves, and you can command your computers through uh, mental, just thinking. And they're all working on that extensively right now using these MRI machines called functional MRI, where they're trying to look at brainwave patterns versus what your conscious thoughts are to be able to decode those. And logically, that's going to go into talking to computers. And if we did it wireless, we're darn near close to what you're describing on these extraterrestrial spacecraft.
Wow. Now, would you say that based on what you're saying between the difference between Syrians and Pleiadians, is there a difference in the advancement of technology?
Yes,
So you're saying basically the Pleiadians are more advanced than the Syrians?
yes, I believe so.
Okay, that's interesting.
And
Okay.
but there's other groups out there who have different approaches. Like some groups come to Earth using wormholes, so they've learned how to manipulate the physics that connect parallel universes and things to sort of create a passageway. So they don't need a spacecraft. They get in a room there and boop, they go through the wormhole and they show up here. Um,
Wow.
so
What about?
there's a
Oh,
lot
go
of
ahead.
different approaches, depending on what your physics are.
Huh. What about the Arcturians? How do they do it?
I think they're more of the wormhole approach. You know, they
Hmm.
they don't get into a physical craft, so to speak, to go anywhere.
Okay. What about jump rooms and teleportation, that kind of thing? Do you think that's coming forward for humans?
Yeah,
Or, I mean,
I do. I do. I think it'll be something that we adapt from ETs rather than advancing our technology just where it stands right now. I think we'll get a boost to get those uh, particular technologies going.
because the technologies we use at the current time are pretty antiquated, really,
Well,
compared to what.
I look at our physics, and we have our Newtonian physics, which is when a car hits another car, what happens to the energy? That's Newtonian physics. And then we have the atomic physics that includes the quantum mechanics, and that takes us to a different level with some very strange effects. And some people try to say, well, that only applies to little nuclear particles. It doesn't apply to big things. Well, it does apply to big things, and it can apply to big things. I believe that there's another layer of physics over that, and maybe other layers over that, where our physics are a subset of something much bigger that has a much stronger explanatory nature of how things in the universe work. If you talk to a standard physicist about electrons, they say, yeah, it's a particle and it has momentum. And if you speed it up, it can hit things and impart energy. If you talk to somebody in quantum mechanics and you say, tell me, what is an electron? They say, that question doesn't make any sense because they see particles as blinking in and out of existence on a periodic basis and doing some quite bizarre things. And so they don't see it as, yes, I can say definitively that an electron is a particle and you can go pick one up. They wouldn't commit to that statement. So I think there's more layers of physics over ours, and It's just a matter
I
of
don't
learning
know.
how to work with those.
That coincides with something that a physicist that I had the opportunity to talk to for a short while. That a lot of our physics isn't what we think it is, or it's not all correct. There's so much more to learn in that regard. And I'm not a physicist by a long shot because I've never studied it, but it was making sense what he was saying to me. Now, I also understand that, you know, our solid objects, or even our body for that matter, is actually beneath it all. If you're able to look at it at the very smallest letter, you're looking at light, and we somehow
Yeah.
make it
Yeah.
hard by our thoughts or our
Hmm.
beliefs. Or is that
Yeah.
true?
That's one way to look at it. Yeah.
Wow,
I mean, Einstein, the E equals mc squared, there's this interaction between matter and energy, and it works that way, very conveniently to do these things.
fascinating, fascinating. And we get these bigger and stronger microscopes, so to speak, and
Hmm.
electro. Um, I forget what you even call them all, but I spectrography, and some of them are even hard to pronounce. But anyway, to, so through the ability to do that, it's taking our level of knowledge to a higher
Yes.
degree.
Hmm.
Fascinating. Okay. Wow. We have
There's
so
still a
much to
lot to
learn.
come.
Yeah, it's fascinating too. And the more we get, do you get? I mean, a lot of people talk about getting downloads. Do you feel like you get downloads
Yes.
or of information from benevolent beings?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Or directed or led to certain things, and oh wow, and synchronicities and things like that.
I get a lot of intuitive flashes on things. Yeah.
Ah, okay. I figured you did.
Hmm.
I just thought I'd have you confirm that. But I think you're a very talented and knowledgeable energy healer, just
Well,
from
thank you.
what we've talked about right here and right now. And uh, actually, I don't know if you'd be interested, but I would love to have another session at another time with
Sure.
you on the show here, and continue to talk about the things and the new things that are coming forward.
Hmm.
And because it seems like we're so much, there's a lot of disclosure coming forward.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you can't even keep
Absolutely.
up with it.
Hmm.
And I tend to be an information junkie, and it's fascinating. I don't get to read everything that I want to read, and sometimes I'll start a video that I want to watch, and before it gets done, I get interrupted and I don't always get back to it. And then I see something
Hmm.
else that I'm interested. I don't know if that's information overload or what, but
It's by design. Information overload, particularly YouTube. Um,
mhm.
People really need to pay more attention to the information that that they're exposed to, because the autoplay feature at YouTube, that is just work of the devil. I'm telling you. I mean, whether or not you believe in the devil, that is just definitely the work of evil. Because if you fall asleep, if you're watching a YouTube video, and I'm sure a lot of people do this, if you fall asleep while you're watching the video, then YouTube decides what your subconscious mind while you're sleeping is exposed to. And
Yep.
you have no way of knowing what it's going to be, because
Well, I think
it could be any crazy thing that YouTube pulled out of their playlist and decided to drill right into your brain while you're happily snoring away. Turn off autoplay. If
Yeah.
you want to watch a video, do it. Make the conscious decision. Yes, I see that. It's something that interests me. I'm going to watch that. Don't give
Hmm.
away that power.
well, here's something that's probably even worse than YouTube. People fall asleep to their TV, and there's definitely programming on TV. That's a
Yeah.
well-known fact, and that's why they call them programs. But anyway, well, we're coming up on almost an hour now. If do you have something else you might want to add, or
Well, just listeners, viewers, feel free to go to my website, davethemystic.com. I do talk about the different services I provide, and I also have some short videos there to talk about them too. So a lot of information there. If you're interested in some of my services, just let me know through the mailer on that website, and I'll get back to you.
yeah, obviously Dave has a great deal of information to offer, and you also have the weekly blog talk radio too.
Right. Every Monday night at 8 p.m. Mountain Time, I do a show. And if you're bored, I have about 550 shows archived. So
Oh wow!
that's, 13, 14 weeks worth of listening if you want on 40-hour weeks.
Well,
Wow.
let's grab a couple of the hot topics that you've covered. Some of your recent shows. What have you talked about? What have you covered? And just kind of give people a teaser about it.
Yeah, there you
Um,
go. That's a great idea.
well, last night I did one, and it's a lady. She has a very impressive book. It's Divine Dance and Ego, and um,
Ooh.
she kind of had a revelation and downloads, and she went through a 40-day process where each day she got downloads, and she journaled extensively about what the information was, and she created a book out of it. And then she also has a workbook to go with the book. So she is very fascinating. Last night, her name is Pamela Girali, and so I can recommend that one. Some of the fun ones. A friend of mine died several months ago. Her name was Shirley Bolstock, tremendous medium, and one of her gifts was she could bring through celebrities. And so I have a number of shows. If you look for Shirley B on my, as you go back through the description, you can find these shows where she brought through different celebrities. And um, I didn't feel like there was anything false about it. I truly felt like I was talking to John Denver or Karen Carpenter or John Lennon or Marilyn Monroe. Very, very authentic, and she got a lot of evidential information that she checked out later that she brought through, and got a lot of validations for her work. And sad to say, she passed several months ago, but uh, I had her on something like 35 times, and probably 10 or 15 of those shows are shows with celebrities. So those are fun, a lot of fun to listen to hear what the messages are.
Oh,
Well,
that's fascinating.
I'm not a simpleton, but I'm pretty sure that the only thing that I would need information that she was actually channeling John Denver would be if she came out with a resounding fuck. He made that phrase famous. I'm telling you.
Oh, that's funny.
Wow. Your show certainly
So we
sounds
have
interesting, and I'm going to have to check it out too.
I am too. And I also think your energy healing is a very profound thing now because of what we were talking about before. That may be something that people would really benefit from because all the
Hmm.
um, there's people are going through a lot right now because there's a lot of change coming forward, and some people are resistant to change, or they don't have an open mind about things. And um, I like to think, and I do believe that the best is yet to come. Would you agree
Hmm.
with that, Dave?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's see people. That's further confirmation on that from another energy healer and psychic and so on. I know you don't really refer to yourself as a psychic, but definitely into energy healing and energy medicine, and certainly have a background to understand all that as well. So I can't thank you enough for coming on our show, and I'd love to have you back again because I think you're
Sure.
very fascinating, and we'll do that in a couple of weeks and take it a
Okay.
step further and see what others think. So thank you, listening audience. I hope you enjoyed this show. I don't see how you couldn't. Thank you, Dave, for being
You're
here.
welcome.
This was wonderful to have you on. And I'm sure people will enjoy this show. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dave.
Bye.
It was a riot.
It
Thank
was. It
everyone.
was. Thank you.
Sure.